My son told me, "You can't come here anymore. This house now belongs to my wife's family." The words still echo in my head like a gunshot. One minute, I was a mother holding the keys to the villa I built with decades of sacrifice. The next, I was a stranger at my own front door, banished by the child I'd once rocked to sleep. If you've ever trusted someone you love, only to be betrayed in the worst way, then you need to hear this story. Before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and share this video if you've ever felt betrayed by your own family. Because what happened to me could happen to anyone, and I don't want you to be next. The last time I saw the villa before everything went wrong, it was a golden Saturday afternoon in late spring. I still remember the smell of pine trees drifting in through the open car window as I pulled into the driveway. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that the world was still good. That I could be safe here. That the sacrifices I made to build this place meant something. But as I rounded the corner, I stopped dead in my tracks. There on the terrace, two people I knew all too well, my son, Ethan, and his wife, Lily, stood in their bathrobes, sipping coffee as if they owned the place. I gripped my overnight bag so hard my knuckles went white. I'd worked 30 years for this villa, pouring my savings and my soul into every detail. The blue shutters. The hand-carved banister. The way the light caught on the lake at sunrise. Every memory of my late husband and I was built into these walls. And now, my own son looked at me like I was an inconvenience. Lily barely glanced up. Ethan stepped forward, his voice cool and rehearsed. "Mom, you can't stay here. Lily's parents are coming this weekend. We want some privacy." His words didn't register at first. I blinked, feeling like the world had tilted sideways. "This is my house, Ethan," I managed, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I was planning to stay a few days." Ethan shrugged. "We got here first. And you didn't call ahead." There was no warmth in his eyes. No trace of the little boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knees. "Please, Mom. We just want some time alone with the family." The family. Not our family. Not me. I looked at Lily, hoping for a flicker of sympathy. She pulled her robe tighter, her expression unreadable. "We'll take good care of the place," she said, as if I were some doddering old lady who'd overstayed her welcome. The ground felt like it was slipping away beneath me. I wanted to scream, to demand they leave. Instead, I did what I always did. I tried to be the peacekeeper. "All right," I said, each word like swallowing glass. "I'll go. But I want to talk about this later." Ethan nodded curtly, turning his back to me before I'd even picked up my bag. I walked back to my car, my legs shaking so badly I nearly tripped on the gravel. I gripped the steering wheel, breathing hard, staring at the home I'd built from nothing. How did we get here? How did I become a visitor in my own life? Driving away from that villa felt like fleeing a battlefield. The sun was setting, and with every mile, my heart grew heavier. I thought about my husband, gone these past 5 years. I thought about the long nights when Ethan was a baby, and I'd rock him for hours, whispering promises that I would always protect him. I never imagined I'd need protection from him. That night, I didn't sleep. My phone glowed with messages I didn't want to read. Old friends checking in, oblivious to the storm inside my chest. But no call from Ethan. No apology. No explanation. Only silence, heavy as stone. If you've ever felt invisible to the people you love most, if you've ever wondered how loyalty can turn to ice overnight, then you understand the ache I felt as I stared at my darkened ceiling. But I promised myself then, in that long, sleepless night, that I wouldn't let them take everything. I would not be erased from my own story. This is how I started to fight back. Morning light always used to mean hope. That Sunday, it just felt cold. I spent hours pacing my apartment, replaying every detail, searching for some hint that I'd misunderstood, that Ethan would call and say he was sorry, that it was all a big mistake. But the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant city traffic, as if the world outside had moved on and left me behind. I checked my phone again. Still nothing from Ethan. Instead, a message from Lily. Her tone was polite, almost businesslike. Hope you made it home safely. Let us know if you need anything picked up from the villa. Picked up. Like I was the help, not the owner. I typed out half a dozen replies, each more angry than the last, then deleted them all. I refused to beg. The silence between us stretched longer. I called my friend Jean, my voice barely more than a whisper as I told her what had happened. She was furious on my behalf, but nothing she said could numb the sting. You're his mother, for God's sake. You built that house. Why are you the one on the outside looking in? I didn't have an answer. I kept thinking about Ethan's eyes, how they'd gone flat, how his smile never reached them anymore. Sunday drifted into Monday, every hour marked by memories I tried to push away. The last birthday we'd celebrated at the villa, the year Ethan turned 30. He'd grinned as I carried out the cake, Lily snapping photos, the air full of laughter. I'd thought those days would last forever. Now the only thing left was an ache so deep I thought I might drown in it. On Monday evening, I finally worked up the courage to call Ethan. The phone rang 3 times before he answered, his voice clipped and distant. Hi, Mom. Everything okay? As if we were discussing the weather. I tried to keep my voice steady. I need to talk to you about the villa. Silence. I heard voices in the background, Lily, maybe her parents. Now's not a good time. Can we do this later? Later. Always later. Always putting me off like an errand he didn't want to run. I pressed on anyway. Ethan, I built that house for our family. Your father and I, he cut me off. Mom, Lily's parents need a place to stay. They're having a tough time, and we barely use the villa. It just makes sense. The casual way he said it almost broke me. I don't care if you think it makes sense. It's not yours to give away, I said, my voice trembling now. He sighed, and for a moment I thought he'd soften. But he didn't. Look, Lily and I made a decision. You're always welcome to visit, but you need to respect our choices. This is our family now. The words, our family, hung in the air, heavy and final. I realized then that whatever bond I'd clung to had snapped, somewhere out of sight. I didn't remember hanging up. I only remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my hands, wondering when they'd started to look so old. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make Ethan feel the hurt that was swallowing me whole. But instead I just sat there, numb. That night, the villa haunted my dreams. I saw Lily's parents moving in, laughing as they unpacked boxes, Ethan handing them keys with a smile. My wedding photos were swept into a drawer. The quilt I'd sewn for Ethan as a child tossed aside. Every piece of me erased, bit by bit, until there was nothing left but empty rooms and closed doors. By Tuesday, the pain had hardened into something sharper. I was tired of feeling powerless. I pulled out the villa's deed, running my fingers over my own name, proof that at least on paper, I still mattered. That house was my life's work. If Ethan thought I would let him steal it away without a fight, he didn't know me at all. That morning, I called a lawyer. Walking into the lawyer's office, I felt a strange mix of shame and anger swirling in my chest. I'd never imagined I would need legal protection from my own son. The receptionist smiled as she took my name, and the moment felt almost ordinary, until she ushered me into a wood-paneled conference room, and the reality hit me all over again. I wasn't here to fight a corporation, or some faceless bureaucracy. I was here because the child I raised was trying to erase me from my own life. My attorney's name was Monica Chen. She had the kind of presence that put people at ease, calm, direct, no nonsense. I handed her the deed and the stack of documents I'd collected over the years, my hands trembling just enough that I hoped she wouldn't notice. She listened quietly as I told her everything, pausing only to take notes. There was no shock in her eyes, only a tired understanding that came from having seen this sort of family fracture before. When I finished, Monica gave a sympathetic smile. I see this more often than you'd think. Property, inheritance, and entitlement, they do strange things to families. I nodded, feeling my throat tighten. I don't want to punish Ethan. I just want to protect what's mine. I want him to respect the line between asking for help and taking everything. Monica nodded. Let's make sure your ownership is absolutely secure. First, we'll review the deed, then look into legal options for restricting any unauthorized transfer or use. Her confidence steadied me. For the first time since Ethan's betrayal, I felt a small flicker of hope. We went through every possibility, setting up a trust, adding security clauses, alerting local authorities, and changing the locks if needed. Monica assured me that, on paper, the villa was mine, and no one could transfer it without my explicit approval. She recommended documenting everything, every text, every call, every conversation with Ethan and Lily. Paper trails matter, she said. If they ever try to take legal action or claim residency, you'll be ready. I left the office that afternoon carrying a thick folder and a heavy heart. On the drive home, I replayed the conversation with Monica, letting her advice settle in. I kept thinking of Ethan as a little boy, the way he'd clutch my hand and tell me I was the bravest mom in the world. Where had that child gone? Was he buried somewhere under the disappointment and distance, or had I been blind all along? That evening, I sat in my small kitchen, the villa deed in front of me, and wrote out everything I could remember from the past few weeks. Every cruel word. Every dismissal. Every small moment when I'd let something slide, afraid to make waves. I realized I'd spent years apologizing for loving too much, for giving too much, for being too available. I'd mistaken surrender for kindness, convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than drawing a boundary. The next day, Lily called. Her voice was soft, almost sweet. Hi, Mom. Just wanted to check if you had any boxes in the attic you'd like us to bring down. The way she said us, as if I were some distant acquaintance, not the woman whose hands built that home. I forced a smile into my reply. Thank you, Lily. But I'll come up myself and get anything I need. She hesitated. Well, just let us know. My parents are moving in this weekend. I hope you're okay with that. Her words settled on me like a weight. They'll be comfortable here. I promise. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. I hung up and let the silence flood in. That was the moment the anger returned, fiercer than before. I wasn't going to let them steamroll me with fake politeness and practiced charm. I spent the rest of the day at my dining table, searching property law websites, writing lists of what I still had control over, drafting questions for Monica. My hands shook, but my heart was clear. If they wanted a fight for my own home, I was going to give them one. Late that night, I called my sister in Arizona. It's time to stop waiting for Ethan to apologize, I told her. He made his choice. Now I'll make mine. That night I lay awake listening to the old apartment creak with each passing car on the street. I could not stop replaying Lily's words, her assurance that her parents would be comfortable in the villa, as if it were already theirs. The quiet in my bedroom felt different now, no longer a refuge but a reminder of everything that was being taken from me. I turned over and stared at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time I truly felt safe with my own family. By dawn, my mind was made up. The era of polite silence was over. I started by making a list of everything I had left at the villa, keepsakes, photos, my husband's journals, the last quilt I'd ever made. Each item was a piece of my life, and the thought of strangers touching them burned in my chest. I called Monica as soon as her office opened, asking if I could change the locks before the weekend. "You are well within your rights," she said, her voice crisp and reassuring. "This is still your home." Her words were like a life raft in a storm. I called a locksmith and arranged to meet him at the villa that afternoon. The drive was tense, my heart pounding with a cocktail of dread and anticipation. As the car rounded the familiar bend and the lake shimmered into view, I could almost feel my husband's hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. I parked by the roses he'd planted our first spring here and walked up the path, half expecting to see Ethan's car in the driveway. But it was empty. The only sign of life was the gentle sway of wind chimes by the porch. Inside, the air was still. Sunlight spilled through the windows, painting golden patterns on the hardwood floor. For a few moments, I stood in the entryway, letting the memories flood back. Birthdays, anniversaries, quiet Sunday mornings spent reading the paper while Ethan and I built blanket forts in the living room. I walked from room to room, collecting small treasures: my wedding album, a faded baseball glove, the watch my husband wore every day for 30 years. Each item slipped into my tote bag with a mixture of grief and resolve. The locksmith arrived exactly on time, a quiet man with kind eyes who worked quickly, never asking why I needed new locks. I thanked him, and when he left, I closed every window, checked every door, and made sure the alarm system still worked. The house was silent but not empty. It felt like a line had finally been drawn, one that no amount of guilt or manipulation could erase. I sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the lake, and called Ethan. He answered, his voice stiff. "Hi, Mom. Is everything all right?" I let the silence hang for a moment, then told him calmly, "I changed the locks on the villa. This is my home, Ethan. You can't give it away to anyone, not even Lily's parents." He was quiet at first, then tried to sound reasonable. "Mom, you don't need such a big place all by yourself. Lily's parents are struggling, and we thought." I cut him off. "You didn't think about me. You didn't ask what I wanted. This house is full of your father's memories. If you can't respect that, then at least respect my right to say no." He sighed. "You're being difficult." I almost laughed at how quickly he reverted to the same tone he used as a sulky teenager. "I'm not being difficult, Ethan. I'm standing up for myself. That's what happens when someone tries to take what isn't theirs." He didn't know what to say, and for the first time in a long while, the silence felt like a small victory. After the call, I walked down to the lake and sat on the old bench by the water. I let myself grieve, not just for what I was losing, but for the boy Ethan used to be. The one who would collect pebbles for me on the shore, who once believed I could fix anything. I wept for the years I'd spent sacrificing, only to end up erased from my own family story. But as the wind picked up, I wiped my tears and stood. There was still a fight ahead, but at least I wasn't alone anymore, not with Monica on my side, and not with the quiet strength that comes from reclaiming your own boundaries. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the villa glowed with the soft light I'd always loved, I made a vow. They could take my peace, but they wouldn't take my dignity. And I would never, ever let them make me invisible again. The next few days were a blur of motion and memories, packing boxes and sending emails, but beneath it all was a pulse of raw determination I hadn't felt in years. I reached out to Monica with every new update: copies of the changed lock receipts, a list of the valuables I'd removed, a running log of every message from Ethan or Lily. Each scrap of documentation was a shield, and I clung to them the way I used to cling to hope when my husband was sick. By Thursday afternoon, the phone calls from Ethan had stopped, replaced by curt, formal emails. He no longer called me Mom in his messages. Instead, he wrote, "I need confirmation that Lily's parents can move in on Saturday as planned." His words were distant, clinical, as if I were a stubborn landlord, not the woman who gave him life. I read his email 3 times before replying, short and clear. The villa is my legal residence. No one may move in without my permission. Within an hour, a new message arrived, this time from Lily herself. Her tone was softer, laced with practiced concern. We just want everyone to get along, she wrote. My parents have nowhere else to go. Can't you be generous, just this once? I felt the old guilt rising in my throat, the urge to please, to give in so everyone else could be happy. But I pushed it down and reminded myself of what was at stake. This was not about generosity. It was about respect, and the right to say no. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by memories I had rescued from the villa, and wrote a letter to Ethan by hand. I wanted him to see my words in ink, to feel the weight of my pain. I told him about the dreams I had for our family, the long hours I'd worked to buy the house, the sacrifices his father and I had made. I told him how deeply he'd wounded me, and how I wished things could be different. But I also told him, in no uncertain terms, that I would not surrender my dignity for anyone, not even him. When the letter was finished, I slid it into an envelope, addressed it to Ethan's apartment, and set it by the door. I knew he might never read it. Maybe he would throw it away, or laugh about it with Lily. But I needed to say these things, for myself, if not for him. Friday came with a knock at my door, Jean, holding a tray of coffee and her famously crooked smile. She sat with me in the kitchen, listening as I told her about the locks, the emails, and the letter I couldn't bring myself to mail. When I finished, she squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, Grace. He needs to know you're not someone to walk over. Grace. That's my name. I realized it had been weeks since I'd heard it spoken without a trace of disappointment or accusation. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Late that afternoon, Monica called with a new plan. Let's talk about strengthening your position even further, she said. You can set up a trust to ensure the villa can't be transferred, even after you're gone. It'll also signal to Ethan and Lily that you're serious, and they can't bully you into changing your mind. We spent an hour on the phone, discussing legal jargon and next steps. By the time we hung up, the path forward was clearer. I might have lost my son's affection, but I was reclaiming something I'd let slip away for years, my power. That evening, as darkness settled over the city, I sat in my living room with the lights off, just the faint glow from the streetlights outside. I thought about my husband, about the promises we'd made to protect each other and to never let anyone take away what mattered most. I imagined him sitting beside me, his hand warm over mine, and I whispered into the silence, I'm not giving up. Not on myself. Saturday dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself was warning me to brace for what was coming. I woke before sunrise, barely rested but clear-eyed, every nerve alert to the smallest sound. By 8 o'clock I was dressed and on the road, a thick folder of legal documents on the passenger seat and Monica's number ready on speed dial. I had no intention of letting Lily's parents, or anyone else, cross that threshold again without my say-so. Halfway to the villa, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. This time, there was no, "Hi, Mom," no apology. Just a clipped, "We'll be arriving with Lily's parents at 10. Please be reasonable." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The rules were already set. The villa was quiet when I arrived, the garden blooming with peonies and the lake shining through the morning mist. I unlocked the door and let myself inside, walking through each room to be sure nothing had been disturbed. Every photo, every keepsake I'd left behind was still there, a silent rebellion against the erasure they'd tried to force upon me. I set out a small pot of coffee and waited at the kitchen table, heart beating fast but steady. For once, I wasn't afraid. At exactly 10, the sound of tires on gravel cut through the silence. I watched through the window as Ethan stepped out first, straightening his jacket, his expression tense. Lily followed, her arm linked with a petite, anxious woman, her mother, no doubt, and a man who carried himself with the stiff pride of someone unused to asking for help. The four of them approached the door together, like an invading army certain of an easy victory. I opened the door before they could knock. "Good morning," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Ethan barely met my eyes. "We're here to get Lily's parents settled." I shook my head. "No one's moving in today. This is my home, and I'm not giving it up." The silence was sharp, Lily's mother shifting uncomfortably as Lily shot me a look of rehearsed disappointment. "Grace, please," Lily said, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "My parents have nowhere else to go. You know how hard it's been." I held her gaze. "I'm sorry for your troubles, but this house isn't the answer. I won't be pushed out of my own life to fix someone else's problems." Ethan tried next, anger rising in his voice. "Mom, you're being selfish. You don't even use this place most of the time. Why can't you do something good for once?" The words stung, but I held my ground. "This villa was built by my hands, your father's hands, and paid for with 30 years of sacrifice. If you want to talk about selfishness, let's talk about giving away what doesn't belong to you." Lily's father cleared his throat, the embarrassment plain on his face. "Maybe this was a mistake, Lily. Maybe we should look elsewhere." But Lily wasn't ready to let go. "No, Mom, this isn't right. We were promised." I felt my patience thinning. Promised by whom? Ethan has no right to offer something that isn't his. This is my home, and unless I say otherwise, it stays that way. The conversation spun in circles for nearly an hour, voices rising and falling, accusations and pleas blending together until I could barely separate one from the next. Through it all, I kept my focus on the facts, the deed clutched tight in my hand, Monica's words echoing in my head, "You have every right to protect yourself." Finally, with no agreement in sight, Ethan snapped. "Fine. If you won't listen to reason, we'll just have to do this the hard way." He turned and stalked off toward the car, Lily close behind, her parents following in awkward silence. As their car disappeared down the drive, I closed the door and let myself collapse against the cool wood, a wave of exhaustion and relief washing over me. The villa was quiet again, the only sound the ticking of the old clock in the hall. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, before finally allowing myself to cry, not out of defeat, but out of the strange, fierce joy of finally standing up for myself. I knew this wasn't the end. They would be back, maybe with lawyers or threats or new schemes. But for the first time in years, I was ready. Sunday brought a deceptive quiet. The villa seemed to exhale as if the walls themselves recognized a battle had been fought. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the sunlit porch, feeling the morning breeze off the lake. For a little while, I tried to remember how it felt to live without tension humming beneath my skin. But even as I tried to relax, my phone was never far from my hand. I knew Ethan. I knew he wouldn't accept defeat quietly. By noon, my fears proved right. My phone buzzed, first a string of texts, then a call. This time, I let it ring until the voicemail picked up. I wasn't ready to let him set the terms, not after everything he'd tried to take. When I finally listened to his message, his tone had changed from anger to a brittle, wounded politeness. "Mom, can we just talk? We don't want to fight, but you're making this harder than it needs to be. Lily's parents are already on their way back with the movers. Can't we find a compromise?" A compromise. That was always Ethan's word when he wanted me to surrender. I stood and walked through each room of the villa, the memories layered so thick I could taste them, my husband reading by the fire, Ethan's childhood laughter echoing down the hall, summer evenings when the whole family seemed invincible. I was done compromising myself into nothingness. I called Monica and told her about the movers. Her advice was firm and calm: lock the doors, call the police if anyone tried to force entry, and record every conversation. I set up my phone by the entryway, my hands shaking only slightly. I didn't want conflict, but I refused to let fear be the thing that shaped my life. At 2:30, the moving van arrived. Lily's parents sat in the back seat, stone-faced, while Lily herself looked out the window, eyes bright with defiance. Ethan got out first and strode to the porch as if he still expected me to change my mind out of guilt. "We just want to talk, Mom," he called, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You're making a scene." I unlocked the door and stepped onto the porch, meeting his gaze head-on. "No one is moving in today. I've already contacted the authorities. If you try to force your way in, you'll be the ones making a scene, Ethan." He flushed, caught off guard by the steel in my voice. "Is that really how you want things to end? Over a house?" I shook my head. "It's not about the house. It's about respect. And you stopped showing me any the moment you tried to take what wasn't yours." Lily's father stepped forward, hands raised in apology. "We never wanted to cause trouble, Grace. Maybe this has gone too far." For a second, I saw something almost like regret flicker across Ethan's face. But Lily's jaw set, her voice hardening. "You're just being spiteful. No wonder Ethan never wants to visit." Those words cut deep, but I refused to flinch. "You're right, Lily. I am being stubborn. Because I've spent my whole life giving, and I'm done giving to people who only take." The movers hovered uncertainly near the van, watching as the standoff played out on the porch. I turned to them, my voice clear. "No one is moving anything into this house. If you set foot on my property, I will call the police." The threat worked. One by one, they loaded their equipment back into the truck. As the van finally pulled away, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The villa was still mine, and for the first time in months, I felt the faint spark of hope that I could reclaim more than just a house. I could reclaim myself. That evening, Monica called to check on me. "You did the right thing, Grace," she said. "Standing up for yourself is never easy, especially with family." I looked out over the lake, the surface still and silver in the dusk. "It's not easy," I admitted. "But for the first time, it feels possible." The following week passed in a strange, uneasy calm, like the world was holding its breath. I tried to settle back into old routines, mornings with coffee on the porch, afternoons tending the rosebushes my husband had planted, evenings reading by the fire, but nothing felt the same. Every ring of the phone set my heart racing. I knew the storm hadn't truly passed, I could feel it gathering just over the horizon. On Wednesday, a letter arrived, official stationery, my name printed in precise legal font. I opened it with trembling hands, already bracing myself for bad news. It was from a law firm representing Lily's parents. The letter was cold, almost clinical, outlining their claim that Ethan had gifted them the villa and that I was unlawfully refusing their right to move in. They demanded immediate access and threatened legal action if I did not comply. For a few minutes, I could only sit at the kitchen table and stare at the page, the words blurring before my eyes. Rage, disbelief, and a hollow kind of grief twisted inside me. I wasn't just being erased from my own life, I was being painted as the villain. I thought of all the holidays I'd hosted in this home, every family dinner, every moment of comfort I'd tried to give. How quickly people rewrite history when greed is involved. I scanned the letter into my computer and emailed it to Monica. Her reply came quickly, "Don't panic. You are on solid legal ground. They have no ownership, no rights. Let's prepare a formal response, and I'll contact the firm directly. Hold firm and keep documenting everything." Still, the threat gnawed at me. I lay awake most of that night, reliving every harsh word Ethan had spoken, every cold glance from Lily, every plea from her parents. In the darkest hours, I almost believed what they said about me, that I was selfish, unloving, too stubborn for my own good. But as the sky began to lighten, I forced myself to remember the truth. about the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given, the boundaries I was finally learning to draw. The next morning, I called Monica, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'm not giving in," I told her. "I don't care how many letters they send or what lies they tell. This is my home, and I am not going anywhere." Monica reassured me that the law was on my side, but she also warned that the situation might get uglier before it got better. "People can be ruthless when they think something valuable is at stake, Grace. But you have me, and I'm not letting you go through this alone." For the first time since this nightmare began, I let myself hope, not just for victory, but for healing. That day, I took every photo I could find of my life in the villa and spread them across the dining table. I saw my son as a toddler in the garden, my husband laughing in the kitchen, my friends gathered by the fire each Christmas. I realized I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for the story of my life, one I refused to let anyone rewrite without my consent. That afternoon, I baked a loaf of bread and delivered half to my neighbor, Mr. Collier, who'd watched over my home when I was away. I told him what was happening, expecting little more than polite sympathy. Instead, he shook his head, his eyes full of fire. "Don't let them bully you, Grace. You're not alone here. This community knows what kind of woman you are." For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not as an obstacle, not as a burden, but as someone worth standing up for. I hugged him goodbye and went home to light the fireplace, determined to weather whatever storm came next. The days that followed were a test of endurance. Each morning, I braced myself for new threats. There were more letters, each one thicker, more aggressive, full of legal jargon meant to intimidate. Ethan stopped calling, but Lily sent messages full of icy politeness, framing herself and her parents as victims. I forwarded everything to Monica and focused on keeping my routine steady. If I gave in to panic, I'd lose more than just my home. One evening, as dusk settled over the lake, I sat by the living room window, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. I thought about my husband and how, when life seemed unbearable, he would simply start fixing what he could, a leaky faucet, a broken fence, a hurting heart. I realized that standing my ground was my own act of repair, a refusal to let what was broken define the rest of my life. Monica kept me updated on the legal front. She'd responded firmly to every letter, shutting down each claim with evidence and calm authority. "They're hoping you'll cave out of fear," she told me over the phone. "You're doing better than most people in your position. Just don't respond directly to them, let me handle everything." Meanwhile, word of the conflict spread through the small lakeside community. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles, handwritten notes, or just a listening ear. Each gesture reminded me that I wasn't alone. I began to feel something I hadn't felt in months, resolve, not just to keep the villa, but to reclaim the joy that place had always given me. But Ethan and Lily weren't finished. Late Friday afternoon, their car pulled into the driveway. I watched from behind the curtain as they sat there for several minutes, arguing, faces tight with stress. Finally, Ethan got out and walked slowly to the porch. For a moment, he hesitated, almost like the boy I remembered. Then he knocked. I opened the door, keeping the chain on, and looked him in the eye. "I hope you're not here to intimidate me," I said quietly. "That won't work anymore." He seemed startled, then defensive. "We need to talk, Mom. This has gone too far. Lily's parents are miserable, and everyone thinks you're being cruel." I didn't let his guilt trip take root. "You created this mess, Ethan. You tried to give away something that wasn't yours. I offered you love and a home. You responded with betrayal. If your in-laws are suffering, that's not my burden to carry." He pleaded, his voice raw now. "I just wanted to help Lily's family. You know how much she's struggled. I thought you'd understand." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes but not falling. "I do understand struggle, Ethan. I lived it every day for years so you could have a better life. I sacrificed so much, hoping you'd grow up to be kind, to protect the people you love. But this, what you're doing, it's not kindness. It's theft. And I won't stand for it. Lily appeared behind him, her expression hard. So you're really going to throw us out? After everything? I met her gaze, feeling something inside me settle. Yes, Lily. Because I am not a doormat, and this is my line. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind in the pines. Then Ethan turned away, defeated. This isn't over, he muttered. We'll find a way. I closed the door gently and slid to the floor, letting myself cry, not out of fear, but out of relief. For the first time in years, I had protected myself. That night, I called Monica and told her everything. She praised my courage, and together we mapped out the next steps. I was ready for whatever came. The battle for my home was changing me, forging a new strength I'd never known. I felt my husband's pride like a hand on my shoulder, and for the first time, I was proud of myself too. That weekend, the villa seemed to wrap itself around me with quiet solidarity, as if every wall and window had chosen to stand by my side. The air smelled of pine and distant rain, and for the first time in months, I let myself sleep through the night without waking to dread. I spent Saturday pruning the rosebushes my husband had planted so many years ago, remembering the way he'd laugh and promise they'd bloom again no matter how harsh the winter. There was comfort in that memory. Maybe I, too, could survive this storm and blossom on the other side. By Sunday afternoon, I found myself standing on the back porch, watching clouds drift over the lake. I thought about the boundaries I'd let slide for years, each small surrender, each time I'd bidden back my needs to keep the peace. I finally understood that love was not about letting yourself be erased. Love, at its best, was a balance of giving and standing firm. And I was done vanishing for anyone. Just as I settled into this hard-won peace, Monica called with news. They've filed a formal complaint, she said, her voice calm and unwavering. It's full of wild accusations, but nothing we can't counter. I'll take care of every detail. Don't let them rattle you. There was steel in her words that I leaned on, letting her confidence fill the places where my own sometimes faltered. But the next blow came from where I least expected, a letter from Ethan. Handwritten, his familiar scrawl filling 2 pages. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to read it. I stared at the envelope, heart pounding, afraid it would undo the fragile progress I'd made. When I finally opened it, the words were a tangled knot of regret and blame. He apologized for how things had gotten, but not for what he'd done. He wrote about feeling torn between me and Lily, about wanting to be a good husband and son. But beneath every sentence, I could sense the same old expectation, that I would cave, that I'd fix this by forgiving and forgetting. I set the letter aside, my hands trembling. For a few minutes I let the old ache wash over me. I remembered holding Ethan as a baby, promising I'd always protect him, always be there. No one warns you that motherhood can break your heart in so many new ways, even after your child is grown. But as I sat with my grief, I realized something important. Forgiveness didn't mean letting someone steal from you. Loving Ethan didn't mean sacrificing my own dignity or sanity. I wrote him back that night. Not an angry letter, but a clear one. I told him I would always love him, always hope for reconciliation, but that I would not allow myself to be used or manipulated. I explained, perhaps for the last time, that boundaries weren't punishment, they were proof of self-respect. And I told him that whatever happened, would stand by my own choices, just as I had always stood by him. Sealing the envelope, I felt lighter, as if I'd finally put down a burden I'd carried for years. The next morning, I walked into town and mailed it myself, letting the post office door close behind me with a satisfying finality. That day, I spent hours at the villa, packing up a few more fragile things, restoring the guest room to its original order, cleaning out the closets. I was reclaiming my space, piece by piece, and every box I filled was proof that my life was my own again. When evening came, I stood at the end of the dock and let the wind whip through my hair. I thought about the coming legal fight, the battles I might still have to wage. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew that no matter what they tried, I wouldn't lose myself again. I would weather this, and when the storm finally passed, I would still be standing. Monday arrived gray and unhurried, a thin drizzle blurring the edges of the lake. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window as the world turned silver and soft, and for the first time in months I felt a flicker of peace beneath all the battle scars. The villa was quiet, safe. It was my sanctuary again. But I knew the war was not over. Monica had warned me the legal process could drag on for weeks, maybe months, but I was prepared for the fight. I spent the morning gathering paperwork for Monica, scanning deeds and receipts, making copies of every threatening letter, every email from Ethan and Lily, every note of support from neighbors. The more I organized, the more I felt myself regaining control. I was no longer helpless, waiting to see what they would do next. I was building my own defense, stone by stone. Just after lunch, the phone rang. It was Monica, and I braced myself for bad news. But her voice was warm. "Grace, I have something for you. The opposing counsel has reviewed your documentation. They're starting to realize how weak their case really is. They may try to settle before this ever goes to court." I almost laughed, relief and vindication mixing in my chest. "I won't settle, Monica. Not unless it's on my terms. I'm not giving up my home, not for any amount of money or empty apology." "That's exactly right," Monica said. "And I'm proud of you for standing so strong." After the call, I walked from room to room, touching the backs of chairs, the edges of picture frames, the small cracks in the windowsill where my husband's laughter still seemed to linger. Each memory gave me strength. For so long I'd believed that setting boundaries would mean losing everyone, ending up alone. But what I was learning, day by day, was that true loneliness came from surrendering yourself to people who only wanted to use you. That afternoon, I received a text from Ethan, just a single line. "We're not giving up." I stared at it for a long time. For years, I would have taken that as a threat, or a reason to try harder, to please him and win back his love. Now, I simply felt sad. Sad for the boy he'd been, sad for the man he'd become, and sad for all the kindness I'd given that he no longer seemed able to recognize. I replied simply, "I know." And then I set my phone aside, determined not to let his anger poison another minute of my day. The legal wheels turned slowly, but they turned. Monica's updates became more optimistic each time we spoke. "The judge is already skeptical of their claim. They can't prove any transfer of ownership, Grace. Their threats are just that, threats. You are in the right. Stay patient." As the days passed, the air began to change. Neighbors who had kept their distance now stopped to wave or bring over fresh-baked bread. A friend from my old book club brought flowers and sat with me on the porch, sharing stories that had nothing to do with Ethan, Lily, or lawsuits. For the first time in a long while, I remembered what it felt like to laugh without guilt. I began to realize that my life was so much bigger than the battles my son had brought to my door. One evening, as I watched the sun set over the water, painting the sky in hues of gold and lavender, I whispered a promise to myself, and to my husband, wherever he might be. I'm done letting fear run my life. I'm done letting people who don't value me decide my worth. From here on out, I live on my terms. And for the first time, I truly believed it. The day of the final court hearing arrived with clear skies and a quiet kind of determination. I woke early, made myself a strong cup of coffee, and dressed with the same care I used to reserve for special family gatherings. My hands shook just a little as I gathered the folder of evidence Monica had helped me compile, but when I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, a woman who had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and her own worst fears, and still stood tall. Monica met me at the courthouse steps, her calm presence like a shield against everything waiting inside. The hearing was brief, almost anticlimactic after months of worry and dread. The judge listened to both sides, but Monica's arguments were precise, her evidence airtight. The other side's lawyer tried their best to paint me as unreasonable, even cruel, but the facts spoke louder than their accusations. There had been no transfer of ownership. There was no legal basis for Lily's parents' claim. In less than an hour, the judge ruled in my favor. The villa was mine, indisputably, irrevocably. When the gavel fell, a weight I'd carried for months slipped from my shoulders. Monica squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. "You did it, Grace. You never gave up." On my way home, I took the long road by the lake, windows down, letting the wind wash away the last of my anxiety. Back at the villa, the lights seemed softer, the rooms brighter. I walked through every inch of the house, my footsteps echoing in familiar spaces, and allowed myself, for the first time in years, to truly exhale. There were messages waiting for me. Ethan's was terse, a final act of pride. "I hope you're happy." I stared at the words, feeling only a faint ache. There was a time I would have done anything for his approval. Now, I understood that loving him didn't mean letting him break me. Lily didn't write at all. Her parents sent one more letter, more polite than before, apologizing for any distress they had caused and wishing me well. I folded it and put it away. Some things were best left in the past. In the days that followed, I cleaned out the guest rooms, packing away the last traces of the battle I'd just won. The villa became my refuge again, my history, my sanctuary, my proof that I was more than anyone's victim. Friends stopped by with flowers and food, and I let them in, letting warmth and laughter fill the rooms that had once known only tension. One golden afternoon, I sat on the porch and watched the lake shimmer. I thought about the years I'd spent surrendering my peace, my boundaries, and my joy to people who couldn't, or wouldn't, cherish them. I realized that the hardest thing wasn't fighting to keep my home. It was fighting to keep myself. I had lost things in this war, a certain kind of innocence, and maybe the hope that Ethan would always put family first. But I had gained something far greater, my own respect. I'd learned that kindness isn't weakness, that love doesn't require self-erasure, and that sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is stand firm. As the sun set, painting the sky with every color of forgiveness and renewal, I raised a glass to the future. To new boundaries, new friendships, and the life I would build, one choice at a time. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever fought to reclaim your voice or your worth, I hope you'll share your own story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories that matter, and share this with someone who needs a little reminder that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing with me.